All right, so I'm going to go through some of these questions from the review I gave you. We will have one more review in class, and your test is either on Monday or Tuesday, depending on when we see each other. All right. I hear that they're doing like construction next door. If you hear that in the video, I apologize. I'm going to try and make this video as quick as I can. You can skip through it. You can go to any questions that you just need help with, or all of them if you do. All right, so for here it says a cone. Remember, there's going to be 6 questions that are going to be word questions like this, and only a couple of them will the image be drawn for you. So you will need to know how to draw these images. So you need to know what is a cone. All right, but a cone has a slant height of 17 centimeters and a base radius of 8 centimeters. How high is a cone? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my cone. Right, and remember, the dotted lines just means that it's there, but it's behind our image. So we couldn't see it if it was laying flat in front of us because this is supposed to be a 3D image. But we know that this back edge of our cone is there. So when we fill in our information, our slant height is the distance from the side all the way up to the top here. So this is 17 centimeters. And then the base radius, so that means from the center of our base to the edge is 8 centimeters. And now if we want to find out how high the cone is, the height of the cone goes directly from that middle to the middle of our base in the forms of right angles. So here it forms a right angle triangle. So we can draw this off to the side, and where our hypotenuse is 17, one of our legs is 8, and we're trying to find the other leg. So h squared plus h squared is equal to 17 squared. So then we have h squared plus 64 is equal to 289. We can subtract over the 64. Subtract over the 64. So then we get h squared is equal to 225. Take the square root from each side. So h is equal to plus or minus, because it's some number squared, is equal to 225, so it's equal to 15. And then we will reject the negative because since we're dealing with distance, we can only have a positive distance. So h is equal to 15. And don't forget your units. Remember, this is worth a point and this is worth a point. If you do not put it, you will lose a point. Find the length of the longest nail that could fit entirely within the cylindrical can of radius 3 centimeters and height of 8 centimeters. So before we do this, I showed this to a few of you already, but if I draw 4 right angle triangles, all right, and the height for all of them is 8, or one of the legs is 8, and then the other legs are 1, 2, 3, and 4. Which one would our hypotenuse be the greatest for? And as some of you guys were quickly able to point out, is the hypotenuse would have to be greatest for this one here, since all of them will be 8 squared plus some number squared is equal to our 8 squared. And since 4 squared is greater than 3, 2, or 1, we know that this one would have the longest hypotenuse. All right, so we're going to use that while answering this question. All right, so when we're answering this, the first thing we want to do is we want to draw a cylinder. So when we draw our cylinder, all right, we draw our cylinder. Then we need to identify, well, how will this nail have to be placed in order for it to be its largest? Well, first off, if we're only placing one nail in here, we're not going to be able to stand it straight up. If we place our nail there, it's going to fall over either one way or another, here or over on this side. And then as I was talking to you before, since the height of this can never changes, if we put a nail in here, a nail in here, let me change these to different colors. So we have a red nail there, then we have a green nail here, a blue nail here, and then a black nail here. The nail that will be the longest will be the black nail, because as we said, the height wouldn't change, so then the leg will be the longest for the black nail. So that means when we're placing this nail in here, in order to get the longest nail possible, it will go from one edge of the can all the way down to the other. All right, now this will then form a right angle triangle, because our nail, let me highlight this in green, the nail will be this green line going from there to there. That's our nail. Let me make this a little bit better. right? That's our nail going from there to there, and we're able to then, with the bottom of the can and then the height of the can, create this right angle triangle. So we can draw this off to the side, in which we have a height of 8. It says it has a radius of 3, so then this bottom line would be twice our radius because we have a radius of 3 here and a radius of 3 here. So this bottom leg represents our diameter, which is in 6. So then to find the height of the nail, that would be our hypotenuse. So now we can fill it in. 8 squared plus 6 squared is equal to n squared. So then we have 64 plus 36 is equal to n squared. Then we can do n squared is equal to 100. We take the square root of each side. So n is then equal to plus or minus 10. We reject the negative because we can't have a height of negative. So n is then equal to 10 centimeters. So that would be the longest nail that you can possibly fit in this can. All right. As we said, these nails would be shorter because we have the same height, but then a shorter leg. And then we know that if we try to stick a nail in straight up anyway, since it has a height of 8, the longest the nail can be is 8 centimeters anyway, since that would be the height. So the longest nail would be 10 centimeters. All right, so for number 4, it says a cube has side lengths of 3 centimeters. Find a length of a diagonal of the cube. So for every single segment that's drawn, whether in their picture here or my picture here, it's equal to 3. So every single red line is equal to 3, every single black line is equal to 3, and every single blue line is equal to 3. Right, so what we're trying to solve for here, as you see in this picture, we're trying to solve for this back corner, the top of the back corner of the wall, all the way down to the bottom corner of the opposite side. So in order for to do that, it's going through our 3D image. Well, we already know what this is equal to because it's the height of our cube. So we know that this is equal to 3. However, we do not know this segment in green, because that's going from the bottom of the floor to the bottom of the floor. So it's not going along one of our edges, so it's not going to be equal to 3. It's going diagonally on the floor. And then what we're trying to solve for is this, see if I can get a different color real quick. Nope. Let's do purple. Is this purple line going from the top of the one wall down to the bottom? All right, so we're going to draw this triangle off to the side, in which we have the height. Then this is the distance on the diagonal floor. And then this is the distance that we're looking for from the top of the wall down to the bottom. So in order to solve for these first, we will look at the bottom. So it's as if I took the black floor and I laid it down flat on the wall, so we're able to see directly above it. We know that this length is equal to 3, and this length is equal to 3. So I can quickly and easily solve for the diagonal because we know that we have a right angle triangle. And this is an isosceles right angle triangle since these two are the same. And something that we learned before was that means this is a 45, 45, 90. So the hypotenuse is equal to your leg times the square root of 2. So this is quickly 3 root 2. So now we know that this is equal to 3 root 2. We know already that this is equal to 3. And if we're trying to solve for the distance between the top part of the wall down to the bottom, we can use Pythagorean theorem. So it'll be 3 squared plus 3 root 2 squared is equal to our d squared. So this is 9. This will get distributed to both, so it'll be 9 times 2, so plus 18 is equal to d squared. So d squared is equal to 27. We can take the square root of both. So our d is equal to plus or minus the square root of 27. We reject the negative, so d is then equal to the square root of 27. Now, if they're asking you to leave this in simplest radical form, the answer would then be 3 root 3, because 9 goes into 27 3 times, and the square root of 9 is 3, so the 3 will remain. Or if we're asked to round to the nearest tenth, it would then be 5.2 centimeters, and this would be centimeters as well. All right, so for this one, there's actually a few ways that you can solve this. I went through with some of the people and showed them one way in class, but I'm going to go through a different way in this video. I just think that maybe this way might actually be a little bit easier, but it's really no difference. It's all the same, really. You're actually solving for the exact same numbers and everything. but it's your call. I'll show you both ways, and I'll show you both ways. So I'm going to go through it quickly then. So the first way is we have this right triangle in which we know that this black line is 100 because it tells us that all edges are 100 meters. So that means every single edge that we have is 100. So we know that that's 100. We're trying to solve for the distance from the top of that pyramid to the middle of our base, which is going to form a right angle. But we need to get this green distance. Well, if we look at the base flat, so I'm taking the base and we're only looking at the base, we're removing everything above it. I can solve, because I know that all of these are 100, I can then solve for the distance from this corner to this corner. And then if I take half of it, that will be this distance here because this point is directly in the middle of our base. So we can then do, since these are both the same, I know that this is a 45, 45, 90 triangle. My hypotenuse is equal to my leg times the square root of 2. So my hypotenuse is equal to 100 root 2. So then if the whole green line is 100 root 2 and I need half of it because this is in the middle, then I will do 100 root 2 divided by 2. So that means that this green line is going to be 50 root 2. So I can now go to solve for my height. I can say that this height we don't know, so it's h squared plus the green is going to be 50 root 2 squared is equal to my hypotenuse, which I know is 100 squared. So then h squared plus, we would then distribute this into both. So 50 squared is going to be 2,500 times 2, so that will then give me 5,000, is going to be equal to 100 squared will be 10,000. So we subtract 5,000 from both sides. So h squared is then equal to 5,000. We then take the square root, and it says to the nearest meter, so we're going to round this to the nearest meter. So we take the square root of each side. So the square root of 5,000 is going to give us 70.7, so it would round to 71, so it'd be plus or minus 71 meters. And then we will reject the negative, and our final answer would then be our height is equal to 71 meters. All right, so if you understand that way and you don't want to look at another way, skip this next part of this video. But I'll go through the other way I was showing everyone in class as well. All right, now the other way, instead of going from here to the corners, we know that we can draw a line. It's called our slant height. So it's from the middle of our side of our figure to the point of our figure. That is our slant height. And we can then draw a line going from the point of our figure down to the middle, and that will be perpendicular. And then we can go from here to our slant height, and that also forms a right triangle. Since this is directly in the middle and we know that each edge is 100, I quickly and easily can solve that this bottom part of my triangle is equal to 50 because it's half of 100. All right, I don't know the h, that's what I'm solving for, but I would then need to solve for my slant height. Well, the way that we solve this is we can then take off this figure. So if I detach this side of my triangle, my pyramid, and I lay it flat, my slant height goes directly in the middle of that side. So each of these black edges are 100, so I know this is 100, and then I know that this is half of 100, so it's 50. All right, since these are all the same sides, I know that this is a equilateral triangle, which means this is 60 degrees. So that means this one must be 30. So remember, this would be my shorter leg, and the green would be my longer leg. So my longer leg is equal to my shorter leg times the square root of 3. So then my longer leg is equal to 50 times root 3. So I can then plug that in for my slant height. So it'll be 50 root 3. So now, since I know what my base, what one of my legs are, and I know my hypotenuse, I can go ahead and solve for this. So it'll then be h squared plus 50 squared is equal to 50 times the square root of 3 squared. So then here we would have h squared plus 2,500 is equal to, well, we will distribute this in, so that will then give me 2,500. And then we'll distribute this in here times 3, so that will then be 7,500. And then we will subtract over the 2,500. So we get h squared is equal to 5,000, which is exactly what we got in the last triangle. Take the square root of each, so we know that this is going to give me h is equal to plus or minus 71 meters, since we're rounding to the nearest meter. And then we will reject the negative, so our height is just 71 meters. All right, it does not matter which way you solve this. We both got the same answer either way. So it's whichever one makes more sense to you, or whichever one jumps out at you more. But either one is acceptable. All right, so for this one, it just says solve for x. So we know that we have a right triangle here, so we know that we can use a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. My hypotenuse, I know, is opposite of my 90 degrees, so I can substitute my 9 and my x in for a or b squared. So 9 squared plus x squared is equal to 2x squared. So we would then go through this, would be 81 plus x squared is equal to, we distribute the power into both, so it's 4x squared. We then subtract our x squared from both sides. So we get 3x squared is equal to 81. Then divide each side by 3. So x squared is then equal to 27. And then we're going to take the square root of each. So depending on what, I'll write it over here, depending on what we want, we get x is equal to plus or minus square root of 27. We reject the negative. We know 27 can break out to 9 times 3. I can take the square root of 9, so I can say x is equal to 3 root 3. Or if I ask you to round to the nearest tenth or whatever it asks you to round to, we can say, or it's equal to 5.2 centimeters. All right, either one will be acceptable as an answer, just depending on what the directions say. If it does say round to the nearest tenth, then you cannot leave it in radical form. If it says leave in simplest radical form, you cannot round to the tenth. All right, so just make sure you're following the directions. But once again, if you do not do plus or minus, or you do not put your units, you will lose points. All right, that's it for this question. All right, this one said, is the following triangle right angled? The directions on your test will say name if it is a right, acute, or obtuse. So remember, when we do this, we are then filling in c squared. What is this in comparison to a squared plus b squared? You do not have to write the open box. You can do the equal sign and put the question mark above. You can do whatever you want. I just always think that some people make mistakes. So it's good to put something to remind yourself, I am comparing this. And then the next thing we have to do before we can identify what our C is we need to take the square root of 17. Well, that's 4.123. So 4.123 is greater than 4 and greater than 1. So that means the square root of 17 must be my C. So I'll substitute that in. So it's a square root of C, or square root of 17 squared. And then 4 and 1, it doesn't matter where you plug it in. And then we just go ahead and solve. So 17, what is this in comparison to 16 plus 1? So 17 is what to 17? Well, this is equal. So that means that this is a right angle triangle, right? But remember, if c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared, then it is right. If c squared is less than a squared plus b squared, then it is acute. And if c squared is greater than a squared plus b squared, it is obtuse. So remember, we're always comparing our hypotenuse to our two legs. Some people will write it in the other form and say a squared plus b squared like this is greater than c squared, and they will answer this as obtuse because they see the greater sign. But remember, we are always comparing our hypotenuse to the legs. And since this is less than, it is acute. So that's why I told you to get in the habit whenever you're asked to write, is it acute, right, or obtuse, to put your c squared first, so that way you can just follow the inequality symbol. All right, that's it for this question. All right, a rectangle has a diagonal of 15 centimeters and one side of 8 centimeters. Find the perimeter of the rectangle. So here we will draw a rectangle. Doesn't matter which side you make 8. I'm just going to make this 8, and I'm going to say that this is x because that's the other side that we do not know. But we do know our diagonal is 15. And we know that our rectangles have a right angle. So I can solve for this missing side by using Pythagorean theorem. So 8 squared plus x squared is equal to 15 squared. So 64 plus x squared is equal to 225. So x squared is equal to 161. Take the square root of each. X is then equal to plus or minus. I'm going to just say round to the nearest tenth, so 12.7. We reject the negatives, so that means x is equal to 12.7 centimeters. But that's not just what we're trying to solve for here. Actually, let's not round right now, and let's rewrite this as, you should just use your answer button, but I'm going to leave it as 6.886. I'm going to round it here because that way I don't want to be off of my answer at the end. Remember, you don't want to round in the beginning, you want to round at the end. So you should be using your answer key. But that means this is equal to 12.6886, and so is this over here. 12.6886, and this is equal to 8. To find our perimeter, we add them up. So I will add up the same side. So I'll add up these two, 12.6886, and then I will add 8, and then I will add another 8, and that will then give me that my perimeter is equal to 41.3772 centimeters. And if I'm trying to round to the nearest tenth, then that will give me our perimeters equal to 41.4 centimeters. Right. If you rounded this in the beginning, you'd end up getting the same answer, but sometimes, remember, you could be slightly off, so you want to round at the end and not in the beginning. So you should be using your answer key as you're typing this in. Or you can round like I did to the 4th or 5th decimal place, and then you'll be fine there. All right. It says a circle has a chord with a length of 10. So the first thing you should do is you should draw your circle and draw your chord. It doesn't matter where you put it. It just cannot go through the center. And we know that this is 10. The shortest distance from the circle center to the chord is 5 centimeters. So here's my circle center. So this is the shortest distance. It's that line that's perpendicular. So when it's perpendicular, we know it's perpendicular bisector. So that means it's cutting this in half. So that means this 10 is going to be cut into 2 equal parts of 5 and 5, because from our center circle, we can draw a perpendicular bisector through any chord, right? And then this distance here is 5. And now it says find the radius of the circle. So the radius is this segment that goes from the center of the circle to the edge of our chord. So in both cases, we have these right triangles in which we have our legs are actually both 5, and we're trying to find our radius. Well, in this case, since these are both 5, we know that this is equal to a 45, 45, 90 triangle, because we talked about if our two sides in a right triangle are equal, then that means that the angles are also equal. So we can just go ahead and solve this quickly by just using our hypotenuse is equal to our leg times the square root of 2. So we substitute it in. Our radius is equal to 5 root 2 centimeters. All right. If it asks you to round to the nearest tenth, you can just type this in your calculator and round it, but this is your final answer. You could also use Pythagorean theorem of 5 squared plus 5 squared is equal to r squared. This will take you maybe a little bit longer. All right. If a 15-meter ladder reaches twice as far up a wall as it does the base is if a 15-meter ladder reaches twice as far up a vertical wall as the base is out from the wall, determine the distance up the wall to the ladder. Determine the distance up the wall to the top of the ladder. All right. So for this one, it's telling us here we have a wall, and our wall will intersect with the ground at 90 degrees. Right here we have a ladder. Let me put this in brown if I have it. Here we have a ladder that's going up our wall. Right? It's telling us that the distance from the ladder up the wall is twice as far as it is from the base. So now if we think about this, we know that our ladder is 15. Right? We know it's 15 meters. They gave us that. So if I told you that we are 2 meters here, then if we're twice as high up the wall as we are from the base, that means this must be 4 meters. If I told you that this is 3 meters here, then that means this must be 6 meters. So the way that we're doing this is we're taking the shorter distance, whatever that is, x, and we're multiplying it by 2. So the way that we can represent that we are twice as high up the wall as we are from the base of the wall is that our base would be equal to x, because that's shorter, and then up the vertical wall will be 2x. And now we can go ahead and use Pythagorean theorem that x squared plus 2x squared is equal to 15 squared. So x squared plus 4x squared is equal to 225. 5x squared is equal to 225. Divide each side by 5. That means x squared is equal to 45. We take the square root of each. X is equal to plus or minus the square root of 45. We reject the negative. So x is equal to the square root of 45. I'm going to finish it up here. The square root of 45 can be broken out into 9 times 5. We can take the square root of 9. So we can say the x is equal to 9 times the square root of 5 meters. All right. If it asks you to round to the nearest tenth, then you'll just round to the nearest tenth. But however, it says determine the distance up the wall to the top of the ladder. So that means we want this distance. Well, we solved for x, which is how far it is from the base. So this is twice it. So that means the height is equal to 2 times 9 times the square root of 5. So that means our height is equal to 18 root 5 meters. All right. Then if we ask to round to the nearest tenth, just type this into your calculator and round to the nearest tenth. All right. But the one thing that you need to make sure that you know how to do is how to represent that something is twice as long as something else. It will be 2x and x, because we're just doubling it. We are just multiplying it by 2. All right, this is the last question, and it's 10b. So we have a tangent that's going from a point to the circle, and we don't know how far that is. Now, what's misleading about this question is this y minus 6. It gives us the arrows. So most of the questions we did, and when we wrote something here, it was telling us this whole distance. But since the arrow is only going from that point to this point, that means this black line that is true is y minus 6. So our radius doesn't change in the circle. So since it's 8 there, it's 8 here as well. So that means in order to get this entire distance of this red line, it would be y minus 6 plus the radius, which is 8. So that means it's actually equal to y plus 2. All right? And we know that our tangent forms a right angle with our radius. So now we can go ahead and set this up because we have a right triangle in which our hypotenuse is y plus 2. We don't know the tangent, so that's y, and our radius is 8. So now we can go ahead and solve this by 8 squared plus y squared is equal to y plus 2 squared. Right, now we need to actually go ahead and FOIL this out, so I'm going to do it up here. So y plus 2 squared is the same as y plus 2 times y plus 2. So we can again go ahead and distribute this y in and get y squared plus 2y. Then we will distribute this 2 in, so we get plus 2y plus 4. So this gives us y squared plus 4y plus 4. So we have 64 plus y squared is equal to y squared plus 4y plus 4. So now we will go ahead, and since this is equal to, since we have a y squared, we need to set this equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract this y squared, subtract this y squared. I'm going to move everything to the right-hand side, so it would be minus 64 and minus 64. So I get 0 is equal to, these cancel, 4y minus 64. So I will then go ahead and add over the 64 to both sides. I'm sorry, it's not 64. It will be 60 because 4 minus 64 is negative 60. So we'll go ahead and add over the 60 to both sides. So then we get, let's finish up here, 4y is equal to 60. So we divide each side by 4, divide each side by 4. So that means y is then equal to 15. All right, and then 15 centimeters. So depending on what they ask, if they ask you to find the length of the tangent, then it's just 15 centimeters. If they ask you to find the distance from the edge of the tangent to the center of the circle, you'll have to plug in 15 and say 17 centimeters. It just depends on what they're asking for. All right, but that is it for this video. That's it for this review. We will do one more review in class, and then you should really be working on these problems pretty much today, tomorrow, because this test is probably going to be one of the harder ones that we've seen because there's going to be a lot of figures that you will have to know how to draw and how to set them up.